Okay. Give me a second. Mm.
I don't know if
Yan, can you unmute yourself? Sorry, I muted you.
Okay, yeah,
Okay, there we go.
unmuted.
Okay. All right. So let's go talk about. Okay, we're all right. Okay, we're good. All right. So welcome everyone. I hope everyone really enjoys today's little interview. What we're going to be talking about is AI and how that's affecting data science and machine learning. And let me tell you, AI is just unreal. And I don't think people even can really grasp what what is happening with AI right now, because it's so large and so immense that we have no idea what is really happening. The growth of AI is incredibly fast, and the impact it's going to have on society is incredible. It's actually quite, it's almost like we're living in a world of sci-fi. We're seeing advancements move so quickly that I can't even imagine what's going to happen in just even a week's time anymore. So I want to start off by pretty simple. Let's start off on this simple scale. So Yang here is a statistician. Is that right? Is that on
Yes,
in
yes,
Hyundai?
yeah.
Okay,
Mhm,
statistician in
yes.
Hyundai. And so, I mean, just let's start easy. So, what is it that companies want from data scientists? So that what is it you guys are contributing to companies?
So kind of historically, I'll start with an example. Actually, as a story, and actually we talked about this today. So, my prior boss at Citigroup, I was at Citigroup. My prior boss used to be at it was at American Express, and you guys, some of you might have American Express credit card, and once upon a time, when you apply for this credit card, you sent your application by mail. This would have been the 60s and 70s, to this giant warehouse of human underwriters. And you would write down, this is your name, like this is, you have, this is your job, and you have, you have three living grandparents, whatever, and you have a human that will either accept or reject your application. And they all have their own rules. They might say, you know what, I like your handwriting, and therefore we will accept therefore we will give you a credit card. And my boss, Dave McCallier, was the first generation to use the kind of statistical models that's used to power your FICO scores today, to create an underwriting model. And in the 70s, he was the first generation to he had gotten his PhD, he's gotten out, and that was the first generation to kind of say, hey, you know what, instead of these human writers, we will run we will run these models, these underwriting models, to decide who we should send out um credit cards to. And American Express said, okay, well, what would you test? Who does it better? Is it machines or humans? The machines won. And within a few years, all those, if you can visualize all these human underwriters in these giant warehouse type offices with rows and rows of tables, they all disappeared within a few years. And in some ways, and ever since then, in the finance industry, we have data science and statisticians that do these things. So we are paid to create underwriting models to decide who to give out loans to at what rate, and how much, and to forecast our losses so we can have sufficient capital for loss reserves. So all sorts of major risk, kind of risk analysis and forecasts. The finance industry uses some statisticians, econometricians extensively, and some of us will be replaced by machine learning and AI.
Okay, so then what is the difference between data science and like machine learning?
So within the industry, I would make this a little bit of this nomenclature a little bit. So when we say AI and machine learning, there's a little bit of a difference here. So when I say AI, it's more along the line of, you're thinking of ChatGPT, right? This kind of neural network, or self-driving cars. So you have kind of this these kind of human intelligence. I know this is this human touch that says, I know that this is a traffic light. I know that, or I can carry on a conversation with you. Within the finance industry, we are more concentrated. We are more focused on machine learning, which is a subset of this AI, where it's this in some ways um this hybrid, in some ways functionally, or this hybrid between traditional statistical models and the kind of all these new um, data science, machine learning, AI type modules. And um, because at the end of the day, we still want to be able to better forecast losses and better understand, okay, who if we're underwriting loans, who can we what rate can we give to which borrower in such a way that that a financial institution may maximize its net earnings. And
Okay.
so
Go ahead.
so in that case, the techniques are a little bit different.
Okay. So tell me, 6 months ago, ChatGPT was released.
Hmm.
It's incredible that it's only been 6 months ago, just because I think the impact is just huge.
Hmm.
How is that impacting the whole data science world?
In my corner of the world, the anticipation is that this is the future. And actually, we've just you know we just had a meeting with my corporate overlords, Korea, and we talked about how do we create this future world. um but it's not as simple. In you know there's this new technique, right? There's this new data technique that but there's a whole bunch of things before and after. And I think um I've been struggling to kind of think of an analogy, but I think the analogy that I came up with is, let's just suppose that you're trying to, let's just suppose that you're a, you're up and coming competitor. You're going to, and you're gonna outsell. You come up with this amazing airplane design that's better than Boeing and better than Airbus. So everybody agrees that you have this amazing airplane. You have this amazing airplane design, and you does a proof of concepts, and you fly this plane. But it's not it, you're not going to produce planes that's going to outsell Boeing tomorrow, but because just because you have this great idea, you still have to stand up this entire production process. You need to source, you need to find people to source your raw material. You need to create a factory. You need to have people to do QA to make sure that your plane is okay. Every single one of your components, millions of them. And that's kind of where we are for machine learning. Right now we've had um, we've had proof of concepts, and it works. We know that it outproduces, but getting that from proof of concept to actual production, there are all sorts of considerations. And within that, there is the whether or not our existing infrastructure have powerful enough computers to score these things so that these forecasts could be created in real time. There is things like, can we pass regulatory muster? Can we explain what the model is doing to regulators? So all these things have to stand up. On top of that, we know from experience that within the finance industry, machine learning methods are more prone to get sidelines, are more sensitive to bad data. And so now you need to hire a lot more people to assure that the data that goes in is much cleaner. And so in the conference I went to, we do have banks that use machine learning in its production pipeline right now. And and they, they actually have more people on that team than your standard also econometric teams, precisely because of all these things. And so within the finance industry, in this case, it's actually not a labor saving device. It actually adds more labor, and they're willing to do this in exchange for that better lift, because in State Street's example, where they actually are managing a $1.5 trillion asset. They run ETFs and stuff like that. For them, that extra 10% improvement is worth hiring that 70-person team.
So what is it that AI is doing for you that before you couldn't do? You didn't have to do. You had to do by hand.
So for us, we are in the process of, so the quickest thing, the quick hit, the two quick hits in the quick hits, and we are in the process of kind of we're exploring. So previously we had, for example, fraud detection. So for this is actually fraud detection is actually probably the best example for AI usage, because the advantage of AI is that it's learning by itself. And so a typical fraud for auto is that someone might steal someone's identity and go in, pretending someone you know takes out a car loan, drives the car, loads that car off on the dock and have that car shipped off to Jamaica. um and we need to kind of identify tiny little patterns, like, okay, wait a minute, this person bought a car in California using a Louisiana license plate. Does that make and we need to identify these kind of patterns, and AI is much better suited than that than classic kind of manual detection. And it's okay, I know how this has happened in the past. And so that would absolutely um improve kind of the operations for kind of financial institutions.
It's incredible because I haven't been able to look into it, but someone was telling me that Google Looker. Are you familiar with that?
I am not.
So now, like, I don't know if there's gonna eliminate jobs or not, but now managers can just come in and just say, like, hey, what is the percentage of customers who are returning their product? And
Hmm.
then it's
Hmm.
going to, using human words,
Hmm. Hmm.
turn that into data,
Hmm.
even
Hmm.
though
Hmm.
it doesn't know what the data is. It can read the database schema and then turn that into an answer for you. And that's remarkable to me because it's just like, man, that's such a human thing. That's such a generally what you expect humans to do, but now it's able to do stuff like that.
So I'll give you a
So,
couple examples of what I think how AI would affect the employment market. So for example, call centers, right?
mhm,
And so call centers require someone to process incoming information and say, okay, hey, okay, I know, let me refer you, let me kind of transfer you to, collections, or I'll transfer you to, early payment and stuff like that. A lot of that with with something like ChatGPT, you pair that up to text to speech and large language model, that's going to reduce a lot of demand for call centers. And you know every call center is a big that's a big source of employment.
mhm,
And it'll have disproportionate impact. We know, for example, that Atlanta and Dallas are two major nodes for call centers. And
mhm,
so the rise of AI will impact those two cities disproportionately.
mhm.
The flip side of that is, I can see, for example, what could increase, how AI could increase employment. Lawyers. Think about how
Really, I think it's the opposite.
No, well, think about this, right? Think about where this future world is, right? So think about how you can use AI to improve drone delivery by Amazon. Right now, now you can parse information. You can say, and you can kind of automate. Hey, go pick up this. Go pick up this. Go pick up this package in the warehouse. Load up to a truck. Have this drone fly and drop that box into someone's backyard 2 miles away. The very act of having that drone flying into someone's backyard raises all sorts of legal questions. What can be in the backyard, what cannot be in backyard, and you need a lot of human judgment, because to kind of come to hash out something, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, what makes sense. And there's a lot of kind of uncertainty there that has to be hashed out by human minds.
Really, I see. I think the opposite. I think lawyers are one of the most primed to go because they're recall. It's about memory. So it's kind of like I was listening to this one celebrity. He was saying like he got rid of his lawyers, and
Mhm.
then they're like, "What happened?" He said, "So I had a question. So I asked ChatGPT the question, and then I asked my lawyer the question, and he gave me the same exact answer.
Right,
So
but
instead of paying $100 an hour, I just asked ChatGPT now. So
it's
that's
it's
why
one
it's really yeah, David Cho exactly.
that part will be get replaced. but actually writing new rules, you know,
Yeah.
writing new rule part, that will require a lot of kind of people thinking through this through. And that I don't think will be replaced by chat by AI, because that's not recalling past information. This is trying to figure out new information. This is uncertain. This we're entering. This is a you're entering the world that no one has, we humans have not seen before, AI has not seen before. And
Hmm.
so trying to ask AI to bootstrap itself into writing rule for something it's never seen, you know, that's gonna push, that's gonna tax its abilities. It's going to tax human abilities.
Yeah.
But at least we can kind of figure it out, because we actually live in the world that we're gonna write rules for.
So right now, data science can do a lot of easier questions. I feel
Hmm.
like I think like how many customers call us
Hmm.
in a month. And it can take literal words and turn that into information, which is
Hmm. Hmm.
incredible. And
Hmm.
then you're saying also it can find deeper, more subtle patterns that is more difficult for humans to find, right?
I think yes. And in fact, it is part of the machine learning aspect, and especially for something like fraud detection.
Mm-hmm.
It's able to say, it's much more capable at finding, like, okay, well, maybe someone for, maybe not all people with Florida with Louisiana license buying cars are committing out of, but I noticed that, hey, maybe this person with with the Louisiana licenses, who also happens to be, who also have a rental car, who drove from a completely different state, like these kind of weird combinations that humans may have a harder time picking up. This is where you get when you get machine learning to pick up those patterns and say, okay, hey, the next time that happens, that's a red flag.
Wow, interesting. Okay, so then let's turn it around the other way. What will humans be doing in the future? And I know you said, cleaning data. It seems like you're saying cleaning the inputs will
Hmm.
help make sure the outputs are better.
Hmm. Hmm.
But like in general, what do you think what's our role in this whole data science analytics world?
I'll give you another example within the finance industry. And so you guys, you know that once upon a time, spreadsheet was literally a spreadsheet, right? So
What do you mean?
it's called spreadsheet, as in, 100 years, like 700 years ago, when they say spreadsheet, it's literally this giant piece of paper that's
Oh,
plastered on the wall, and people write numbers on it. And, all the cross tabs, someone's actually manually calculating them. And so every large company have a FP&A department, financial planning analysis. And they might say, okay, well, you know what, assuming our budget, assuming our income, assuming our revenue, assuming our costs, this should be our annual profit for the next year. And back in the day, when you literally have spreadsheet and that's spread on this giant wall, they'll say, okay, well, this giant wall, let's all calculate all this number. Let's see let's put all these input in. We'll figure it out. We'll calculate numbers, and we'll come back on Monday, see what this number says. And what happens when they had, early computer spreadsheets, Lotus 1 2 3 and stuff like that. It's not like they got rid of people. They simply just added more work, because back when you have just one physical spreadsheet, you just say, well, we'll just say, you just one scenario. When you start to add spreadsheets, every single financial planning and analysis group in every single place, like, okay, well, this is our baseline. What happens if A happens? What happens if B happens? What happens if um what happens if our expected sales didn't hit this? What happened if our expected sales was only 50%? How will that impact our bottom line? And so the introduction of a new technology didn't reduce humans. It actually just simply added more work.
hmm, interesting.
And I can see that happening. And so AI might automate a lot of the work away. But what that also just means is that when companies are doing for financing, they just say, well, instead of only being able to do um, you know 10 scenarios, let's do 50 scenarios.
Hmm. Hmm. So then, what should we be doing to make ourselves more marketable to the market, to the job market?
So it depending on what you want to do. And actually the State Street the managing director at State Street actually made this point, and I think it's really interesting, is that how I said that some of us will get replaced by AI. At least right now, the opposite is actually true because um, when you create, you think about you creating this machine learning pipeline that at the end of pipeline you're creating forecasts for them to do open market trading. At the very beginning of that pipeline, it's actually a lot of data analysis and doing old school econometrics to understand the data that will be going in.
Mhm.
And so um, in some ways it's one of those things is that because the machine learning process is this black box, they can't use the process itself to gain any insights of okay, what's driving the results. And so they're actually doing a lot of the old school econometrics on the front end to say, okay, the data that's going in, I think these data are, qualitatively is going to have these impact. And they need to use that to kind of to both benchmark and shed light on what this black box is doing. Because this front end analysis is part of the guardrail, because the biggest fear is that this black box goes off the rail and they don't know it. And if you think about what BroadStreet is doing, is that they're using this black box to inform their price hedging strategies. And they're buying options on this using the results coming out of this, which means that if this goes wrong, they can lose a ton of money. And so they know that when done right, this black box gives them a 10% improvement in forecasting capabilities. But what they also done is they built these massive guardrails around this black box to make sure that A, it doesn't go off the rails, and B, you have all these people that's providing advance warning if it's even a bit going off the rails. And so this massive guardrail employ with this is the 70 people the 70 the head count of 7 people in that department. A lot of that is providing that guardrail.
So you're saying that the almost like the AI makes the hypothesis, and then we QA it and verify that
Yes,
what
yes.
its assumptions are correct.
So think about this. You think about this, and again, I'm gonna go back to airplane analogy, right? We have autopilot and we have drones, we have pilots, but at the end of the day, you still want to have two pilots in the cockpit, just in case, in that crazy case, maybe it hits a bird. And maybe you have maybe the AI is able to land a plane by itself, but having that two pilots, as that final say, it still adds to that extra layer of safety.
Hmm. Hmm. Interesting. So then, how do we bring? What is it that we should be doing so that we can bring more value to companies in the new AI world?
I think in the new AI world, it's about this data insight. And so they talk about really the big thing. I'll go back to the State Street example. The big part is for them to kind of say, okay, let's look at the data. What's identify the example they use is you have to understand, if when you look at, for example, stock price data, if you don't account for the fact that for things like weird things like stock splits or reverse splits, that without the data that you pull in, it's going to look like it fell off a cliff, right? Because you have a stock split. So $100 stock is now $50 the next day. You
Hmm.
feed that now you feed that data series into your machine learning algorithm. It's gonna absolutely gonna give you kind of nonsensical forecasts. And so you have to fix that data before you feed it in. And you have to know, so this is where this combination of industry knowledge, business know-how, understanding what can break your machine learning algorithm, that all comes together on the front end. And so this is where just understanding what you're doing, understanding your industry, understanding kind of your the market, that's still very valuable.
So
Actually,
then,
I would make the argument it's more valuable because now you're complemented by this AI tool.
what is not as important now because of the new AI stuff? Like, what is it like? We're like, okay, we need to rethink like this area of work that, you know, like calculators. I don't think we need to practice like multiplication anymore, or, you know, that type of stuff. Like that's kind of offloaded that work from us.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
What has AI what does AI look like is offloading from us today?
I think, I think I think 10, 15 years ago when I was, when I'm asked to interview people, they'll say, "Hey, do you know, what exact command do you need to do this?"
Mm-hmm.
When you're writing code. And back before, that kind of expertise is kind of important because before everything is on Stack Overflow where you need a book to know, having that in your head is kind of useful for you to write codes. That increasing that kind of hard coded knowledge gets increasingly outsourced to AI. Because you can ask
Mm-hmm.
ChatGPT to write you a sample code, and
Mm-hmm.
you can work your way out from there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually you know what, that's really interesting because I feel the same way with coding. So in coding, I feel like I don't have to sift through the documentation as heavily anymore.
Yeah,
So what I
yeah.
can do is I can have AI kind of write the first script of it, and then
Hmm.
I go through and can kind of pick it at it, and then go like, okay, this is not right, this is not right, and then I can kind of almost QA it and then manage it and
Hmm.
get the pieces
Hmm.
together. But the
Yeah.
first draft of it doesn't need to be me. I mean, this is very analogous to me with emails. So
Hmm.
I use ChatGPT for emails all the time now
Hmm. Hmm.
because it
Hmm.
just allows me to just really pump out something really quickly. So I just say, okay, write to the client that, you know, it's going to be delayed because
Hmm.
of this, and you know, we'll be able to, you know, come up in some other way, whatever. And then I just spit it out, and then AI will come in with a very, like, at least put it into logical order so
Hmm.
it actually
Hmm.
makes sense. And then at that point I just do the last corrections. So it
Hmm.
really lifted a lot of that first draft off of me. And man, the first draft is usually the worst draft to do anyways.
And so, yeah, something like that where your production time goes down. But
Mhm.
but I'm going to guess that it doesn't mean that you simply, what that means is that you write more emails, not that you write the same number of emails.
I think I still read these. I mean, I don't write more emails. I hate emails. But yeah, you know what? I do see what you're saying, because then the friction
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
writing something is a lot less. So now if I go
Hmm.
want to go
Hmm.
update something, then I can
Hmm.
go like, all right, I have an idea, I can update
Hmm.
it, and
Hmm.
the friction of it is not as hard. That's actually really true. So yeah,
I, I think the when what back when we were transitioning from email, from paper to email. It's like, oh, paperless, but you just end up people just end up sending more messages.
yeah, that's true. That's true. So what would you do today if you were like fresh and you're like, all right, I want to enter this industry. I want to make myself very sexy and marketable. AI is a new changing paradigm. How do I like make myself, like, what would you do to kind of like attack this problem of getting a job and making something like you very marketable, especially with the AI stuff? Like, how would you approach it?
I think they're probably, I'm gonna use historical kind of, there are probably multiple strategies. One is that um what I call kind of the artisanal craftsman idea is that you're just really really good at something that's kind of obsolete and people will demand it. Um, the kind of you know the kind of the story that I have is that there are still sword makers in Japan, and they get paid, $50,000 to make a sword, even though no one really uses a sword for what it was intended to use to be. And so there's probably still a market for that. Um, in terms of and in terms of kind of other things, I think I think there's a larger trend. AI has been kind of it has been kind of is by kind of accelerated by the rise of AI. Is the increasing need for generalists. And the story for this is that they had talked about this talk about how um the something along the, I don't know the exact numbers, but the expectation is that now the Navy is going to build warships, and once upon a time warships required thousands of people, each one of them specialists, and you can have someone who's gonna spend, they're gonna train them, they're gonna train years and years so they know how to read a sonar. You can have someone who's going to train years and years and years. And they're going to know how to work at artillery, all that. And now that same warship, instead of requiring thousands of people, it's going to just require a few hundred. And those few hundred people aren't specialists. It's going to be generalists, because now you don't need someone who knows how to read sonar signs and blips and all that stuff, because there's going to be the screen that says, this is sonar, this looks like a ship, this looks like a submarine. But that same person that generalist who's working this computer sonar also needs to know how to work the naval guns. And so now there's a much higher emphasis on being able to work both the naval gun and the sonar, being that generalist.
How would
Because
you how would you train to be a generalist? Like, what would you do?
I have to think through that. I don't know the answer out. I don't know if I have like a clean answer for that.
Okay. Okay. All right. How about this? Where do you think the future of data science is going, like moving forward?
I think it's in line with this. I think there's this bifurcation, right? There's data science, and so you're going to have a class of data scientists that's going to be on the bleeding edge, and they're going to come up with new machine learning techniques, and you're going to have that small subset that's just going to push that edge. But increasingly, they're going to be a lot of kind of the data scientists and statisticians. They're going to be generalists, and we're going to do a lot more data cleaning and trying to kind of um, create charts and tables and econometric that says, okay, this is what's fundamentally causing the change in demand for cars, as a result, due to seasonality. And that will still kind of require a fair amount of human work.
Interesting.
And as a data scientist, at the end of the day, at some point, all these fancy machine learning tools is basically a button, right? You know, there's a procedure, and you can call it whatever you want, XGBoost, gradient, all that stuff. At the end of the day, you might need some you might need some working knowledge as to how to operate it, but you can either be the kind of the super full-on specialist that understand all the math and nuances and all the techniques underneath it, or okay, this is you use the technique for this situation, and you hit a button.
Okay, interesting. So, anyone have any questions? I want to see if anyone has any questions. You gonna type it or unmute yourself? Nobody has any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, Eric, do you have a question?
Oh, it's Jingle.
Yeah, we can barely hear you.
Oh, let me try right now. Is this better now?
A little bit. So
Okay.
try to speak loud.
Okay, all right. So we're talking about what the in artificial intelligence will influence our future, like ChatGPT. One thing that I think important is how do we use those kind of tools to improve our skills, like in the data scientist industry, also code industry. How do we use it to improve our skills to make us better or a scientist or coder?
So the example, the big example for me as right now is immediately I just know where to look for codes. And so here's an example. We switched over to AWS a few years ago. AWS Redshift uses uses PostgreSQL, which is a little bit different from Oracle SQL that we were using previously. The problem for that, and the challenge here is that Oracle SQL has fairly extensive documentation on Stack Overflow, whereas PostgreSQL does not. And when we transitioned over, we ran into all kind of a lot of unexpected results. And there's because different SQL have different functions and they behave a little bit differently. And ChatGPT actually was very good at saying, hey, because I know what I want to do from a previous code, and say, hey, if I want to do XYZ, you know, I know what's it called in either SAS or Oracle. I say if I want to do XYZ, but in AWS PostgreSQL, how would I go about doing it? And ChatGPT was actually very good at providing that kind of answer, and I'm able to provide that path. And so here in this example, I'm able to do my work I'm able to do something related to work, aided by ChatGPT.
Yeah, I think and as an educator, I'm having a real hard time pinning down what we need to know anymore, because I think, like Yang is saying, like a lot of the details now can be done by ChatGPT, and so we can just we can just glide 500 foot over the ground. Like we can just code in that way, have ChatGPT take care of the mundane details in the trenches, things that take a lot of time, but not really contributing to the main intelligence and algorithm to what we're trying to do. And I feel we can almost get across just by understanding how to read code well and then do minor changes. But how extensive that work is very difficult. So like one thing I was testing with was, can ChatGPT create an asteroid game? That little game Asteroid where in the 80s where you're like shooting like a little rocket, and it did really well. It was able to get the asteroids down and then have the little fire weapons and all that stuff. But what it wasn't able to do well is when you start to add changes to it. So you say like, okay, this works. Now let's have different levels, or let's have a health gauge. All these little, as we add on complexity, this is where I see AI struggling with. So if we can keep it at the simplistic level, that allows AI to really, really thrive. And the complexity of the understanding the whole mechanism itself, that's where humans are better understanding. Okay, so this client is very special because they do something very specific. So then we can't handle them the same way. That's something I think AI would have trouble doing.
I see two questions. I'll answer them. So, can you name some of the AI softwares we're using or looking other than ChatGPT? So within our world, machine learning, and this actually gives you a sense of, it's still kind of very evolutionary. And so, when I was at the AI conference, one of the presenters from Wells Fargo's, and they wrote their own Python module. And this gives you a sense of how the evolutionary part of this is, because machine learning is this in general, it's this black box. And in finance,
by the way, I just want to explain black box. Black box means that it does something and you don't completely understand why it does that. So then that's why it's a little bit of a mystery. So like if it goes and computes like, hey, don't sell to people with blue shirts, there may be a very valid reason, but we don't know what that reason is. And so with AI, like if we don't understand a reason, because very dangerous, because is it because there happened to be a big sell of blue shirts on one day and that's where a lot of crime happened, or is it that people are using this to evade detection for some reason, right? So that's what black box is. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
No, that's a great example. So as a black box, so an example they actually think about is that, so for example, if you're banks, right, you offer loans and you apply for mortgages, they need to tell you, hey, we rejected your loans because your FICO score is 580 and our limit is. So when they switch over to, for example, machine learning to try to do underwriting, they can't do something like, hey, we gave you, we gave this person, we gave someone with a 580 FICO a loan, but we rejected someone with a 780. And so what they've done is they've created a module where they take existing machine learning tools, but they added their own constraint. in their case, they added a monotonicity constraint, so that you know higher they make it so that, you know what, if you have higher, if we accept um if we reject someone with the 580 FICO, we cannot give someone with the 570 FICO alone. It's a monotonicity constraint. And so this gives you a sense of how you have this machine learning that comes from from the computer programming world, and we're trying to kind of shoehorn that within the finance context. And so right now, in some ways, I would say that the software world is not quite mature because everyone's still trying to figure all this stuff out. And my expectation, I think, is that everyone's gonna start in 5-10 years, once we figure out what we really want, then you can write automated software, machine learning tools that's specifically tailored for the finance industry. In which case, maybe you don't need 70-person team. Maybe you just need 65 or 60, and that's part of the evolutionary process. So that's kind of relating to the software. So the answer is that a lot of times we're still kind of trying to figure it out on our own, and that also adds to the manual labor intensiveness of using that right now.
Let me chime in as well. So on personal level, I'm using Midjourney for AI images, not related to data science, but I like to use it to generate images. Amazing. I use ChatGPT a lot, and Yang has been saying that the upgrade to the 4.0, where you pay like $20 a month, is actually really worth it, which is crazy because I think the 3 is already amazing. I can't even imagine how much better it can be. And then I heard Google Looker. That's kind of something I mentioned. That was something where people were saying that you can ask a question using a database schema, and then it'll actually answer a question based on that. And then I also use Bard every once in a while. Bard has access to the internet, whereas ChatGPT does not at this point. So that's something that's kind of special. So you can actually use it. I'm not sure if you can do it right now, but if you were to maybe ask, like, what's the percentage of Republicans in California, they might actually be able to retrieve that data, in 2023. That might be something that Bard can be able to do. So by having access to the internet, that's the Google Bard, by the way, that kind of opens up the ability of information. So that's really incredible.
And the question about conference and training opportunities, the answer is we're kind of exploring. So this is the conference I went to was the first time kind of specifically related to AI. I think it was GFMI is a I think that's run by a UK consulting firm. I can send that to AJ so he can kind of pass it on. But I can tell you.
Can you put in the link in the chat?
Sure. Give me a second. And then kind of QA is a clear need, and and they've been talking about this. When you talk about AI, to the people, data cleaning, it's going to be there. It's always, and actually I'll give you an example. I talked to Hyundai. I work for Hyundai. I'm the Hyundai Capital. We're kind of the auto loan part of subsidiary, and we 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we were a startup, and our data is always not going to be as good. You just start up, you're just trying to figure things out. Our data quality is not going to be good. So at the conference, I talked to Ally. Ally is the successor to GMAC. And I talked about, we're Hyundai, we definitely don't have the kind of experience and history that you have. We have also a data problem. The person at Ally just looked at me and said, no, we have the same, we have bad data ourselves. Data quality, fixing data, it's gonna be an issue. That's always going to be the number one issue. Let me find the GFMI.
It's really interesting that bad data exists. Like, what is it? I mean, in the digital world, why does bad data exist? Because aren't people just logging things in like?
So data, your input data is going to be much cleaner in the finance in highly regulated finance mortgage industry. because the person manually inputting that data has to get that data correct, because these are, $300,000, $500,000 loans. Now imagine auto loans. You have someone at the dealership that's inputting this data in. That's not their regular job. Their regular job is to get commission and get paid and sell cars. And so, you know what? Maybe they put in the data incorrectly. Maybe they didn't. Um, and that's where you have lots of input data, and this is where maybe in the future, I think I can see this happening where you have contract and you take a picture of it, and all the written data in the document gets uploaded in its own respected field in the database, so as to reduce that data transcription error. But that's a future state.
Mm. Amy, your question was, how are ChatGPT and ChatPDF related? I'm not really sure about PDF exactly, but I imagine that what they're doing is they're taking a PDF that you upload, and then they're just interpreting it and then using AI to be able to answer your questions based on the information they give you. So ChatGPT itself is actually trained on more information, more models, I think up to 2021 or something like that. But the whole thing is that there's just more diverse information for it to draw funds from. So that's why it can do more things. But ChatGPT 4 has grown exponentially, and it's even more trained on more models, which is why it's even more intelligent, more capable of doing things and doing things even better.
I wanted to ask, like, I can't get past, where are these like chat GPTs and stuff, where are they drawing this information from? Because in my experimenting, it's almost like if I ask it to write a cover letter or something, it's almost as though it's pulling from Google searches that I could do myself and then just like condensing it down into like a short answer. Is that what's happening when I'm using something like
Yes,
that?
in fact, and I'm going to follow up this. In fact, this goes directly to why there will be a lot of job opportunity for lawyers, because ChatGPT is pulling from existing literature. Midjourney is pulling from, it's web crawling, and it's pulling from images, and so now this is going to future. It's things like stock footage companies. I think the stock footage industry is something like $5 or $6 billion industry. That's absolutely going to get demolished. That's no one's gonna pay Getty Images any more money when you can create this from scratch.
Oh my God, I didn't even think about that.
But what that also means is that if Midjourney is using my uploaded picture on Flickr of my pictures, of my travel pictures, hey, I want to get paid. And this is where you will need a lot of hashing out of these details. Okay, maybe we accept, maybe Midjourney, now that Midjourney has taken the place of Getty Images, and they're getting paid, they're getting paid to create stock photos. How much should they pay? How much should they pay me if I can demonstrate that they're using my data to create their reference photos and learning histories, and that will take a lot of figuring out and sorting out, and you'll need a lot of lawyers to figure this part out.
Yeah, it's the whole technology. I mean, the bad thing about using these type of ChatGPT, I mean, it does seem bland when you read it enough. Then you're kind of like, okay, it's kind of boring. It doesn't have that human touch, and I think that's again where the humanity is still very important. We bring in that flavor, we bring in that essence that is very us. Like for instance, when you hear Kanye speak, and then you hear like Elon Musk speak, it feels very different, and that is, I think, where we have to keep cultivating our voice and not give it away completely to ChatGPT. But at the same time, it does allow us to, express ourselves in ways that are like really difficult. Like I think they were looking at Ja Morant, that basketball player who had a gun. It's like his apology letter was written by ChatGPT. They wrote it like, oh, apologize for something I did before, and then it gave that same thing. So like, I mean, I don't think we always have good words for things, and I think that's kind of good that it allows us to kind of express things in a way that need to be said, politely, business speak, because we're not always, adept to that. So, but there always is that humanness that makes us very special, very different, and that's what we need to use to amplify and retain and cultivate even more.
And
Who we are is very special.
nothing says sincere like having a robot write your apology letter.
Yeah.
Quick thoughts on how can data science differentiate themselves from the rest of competition? You know what? At the end of the day, at least for me, at least for a lot of us, ChatGPT at the end of the day is still just a tool. And so ChatGPT might have pointed me to the right, to the right answer, for Redshift SQL, the answer I was looking for. But the first try was still wrong, and I have to know why it's wrong. And so you still actually have to know enough to do it. And so it's not going to completely replace your human capital. You still have to actually kind of know how to debug it. And maybe one day you don't have to do that. But until ChatGPT, 17, where they just completely does that for you, you'll still have to have some expertise in what you're doing.
But then what will it replace? Like, what is it that we should not be doing anymore, in your opinion?
Like I mean, it's a reference tool, and like just off the top of my head, you still kind of have to know. I think it just, for me, it's just I'm not gonna be as, I can be a lot more kind of like, okay, I know this function, or I know how to do this. I don't have to I don't have to imprint that in my head. I can always come back and ask for it. And that frees up, and it's like, it's kind of like how once upon a time you needed a Thomas guide to drive from point A to point A and point B in the greater LA area, right? You have to know, okay, this is my address is on page 258, and if I want to go to AJ's, who's on page 364, follow this freeway and follow the street and do that stuff, and you have to navigate, and you have to know, okay, maybe tiny little tricks like, okay, I don't have a GPS, but I know that if I'm driving at night, I know that airplanes fly from east to west, landing at LAX, so I can kind of figure out figure out the directions. I can't do any of that now. But I still have to know that this is a freeway.
The basic layouts.
I still have to know how to drive on the left hand side. I have to know, hey, this is, and I think that's kind of how I think about it when I think about kind of how AI is going to impact my life.
That's the thing that's really difficult. And again, I'm looking at it from an educator point of view. I'm like, do we really need to teach the whole foundation of everything if we may not need to go into the weeds as much anymore? Very difficult to really project on it, because a lot of things I'm looking at, I'm like, man, when I'm making my judgment, I still need that judgment of understanding how to do it. But I feel that I no longer need to be as perfect anymore, and I can allow it to kind of just, figure it out for me. But it is really, really challenging, because I don't know where humans and AI are, because it feels like we're colliding, but not in the ways, that's great. It's not neat,
Like if I'm teaching, like if I were, in this AI world, so I've taught statistics in the past. And my approach has always been, you can go figure out the formulas yourself. I want to explain the intuition of why this formula is doing this. And I think AI, it kind of accentuates that. Understand the why, understand the why, and let machine figure out the how. And I think that's kind of the general approach I would take.
Understand the why, and then let the machines figure out the how. Interesting. Okay. And so then, how would you take advantage and make yourself special compared to the competition by leveraging AI and like using that to kind of make yourself special in terms of like getting a job? Like, how would you go like, okay, I've done research on this, I've done studies, I use this, and this is how I use it. Is that kind of how you would?
I think the very first part is that figuring out where you want to be, because as you have a world that's increasingly bifurcated between generalists and specialists, what do you want to be? If you want to be the specialist, you're going to go down one track. But if you're going to be a generalist, you're going to, you know, you kind of just say, okay, well, figure out, understand, you don't need to understand, if you want to be a journalist, you don't need to understand, what's, all the little, you have to know, how a car works. You have to know how to drive, and but you don't need to know all the details. So you kind of have to figure out what, I think that's the first step, is to figure out where you want to, which path you want to go.
So what's the difference between a generalist and a specialist?
A generalist, and I'll go back to my example, right? A generalist, for me as a data scientist, for me, it's a difference between a statistician and a practitioner of statistics. A statistician might be someone who's really, really, really good at, statistics, and understand all the math, and understands, the optimization process, and say, hey, I can create a completely new statistical method or AI algorithm, that's going to be the best way of estimating things for this particular instance, for this particular situation. A practitioner of statistics might say, you know what, I know, here's the situation. um I kind of know, the general sets of tools I should use for this. I may not be it may be the best tool, it might not be the best tool, but here's, I can figure out the three or four best tools for this, and it'll get the job done.
Okay. So what are your thoughts about the privacy concerns with ChatGPT?
This is why we need lots of lawyers. I think this is where, we're in this uncharted territory, and we're trying to figure this out. I think this is where there's a lot of things like, I can, I was watching the news the other day, and, the news that they have about, they had this, it was like a news about I think it was like a hit and run car, and it has this very grainy image of a car with the color of the shape. This is perfect AI. This is perfect AI application. Because once you link up all the public traffic cameras, and you link that to a central AI processing, it's going to say, hey, you know what, that based on this vague shape and color in this car, I'm pretty sure it's this car. But then now this is all privacy. Are we okay with this all knowing AI that has access to all the cameras? That has that has 24/7 surveillance of the entire city.
Yeah, I think one thing, technology has really changed our perspective on privacy. So I don't know if you guys remember when Facebook first came out. Facebook was very controversial in terms of privacy, and they were, they were kind of documenting what you were doing on your timeline, and a lot of people felt that was an invasion of privacy. And you know what? Guess what? They were right. Like, I was against them. I was the one critical about them and saying that's a real egregious, violation of privacy. And then, yeah, again, now they're right. Look at what we're posting. We're posting everything online. Now we put on Instagram. Dude, there's like crazy stuff online. Everyone's posting everything. And so I definitely think we have to I think even before we go and say like ChatGPT doesn't have privacy, I'd almost say like, are we okay with that? Because I really think that, man,
Well,
our perspective on what's private now is just completely different than what's 10 years ago.
Think about how you can use neural network to construct a complete profile of a person online, right? So we have white pages online. So there might be 60 Yang Hus out there, and one of them lives in, there's a Yang Hu in Illinois, there's a Yang Hu in California, there's a Yang Hu, and AI can say, you know what, I also see 50 Yang Hu on Facebook, and this Yang Hu says this, I can kind of sort of guess that this Yang Hu has pictures in California probably lives in California. And you sort and you compile individual information based on disparate sources together, and stitch this complete profile of a person. That's an AI job. You can get AI. That this kind of big data match merging, kind of fuzzy merging. That kind of task is specifically suited for AIs.
Yeah, by the way, that's how they track you. The government tracks your spending. So you know how when you're at the supermarket and they ask you your zip code or something, and then so what it is that when you're paying using your credit card, you give the name to like Target or whatever, and then when you give them the zip code, the government buys that information and then they use that to understand your buying habits. And so then that's why when you're buying a Lamborghini or Ferrari and you're only like, a waiter or something, then they're like, oh, what's going on? That triggers their little red flags. So everyone is tracking everything and everything about everyone, and the government is and government is buying data from
When you
stores and distributors.
when you apply for a mortgage, you have to sign a whole bunch of contracts. One of those little lines says that, hey, if we can somehow have access to your supermarket spending accounts data, you give us the right to access them.
Oh, really?
We
Jeez.
have for credit. I mean, alternative data is one of the things that financial institutions have been trying to kind of integrate into their underwriting model.
Yeah. And I'll tell you another thing too. So this is why your idea of privacy needs to be like revamped, because like, so for instance, TikTok, right? So there's a lot of controversy about what TikTok stores, and that is true. However, what you guys don't understand is they also have satellite apps that are not related to TikTok, that they are purchasing that information from and then compiling a bigger profile of who you are. So even if you don't have TikTok, you still are TikTok has information about you, even if you don't have TikTok, because they have information from auxiliary satellite apps that you're installing and using, and their TikTok is buying it. So all these companies are compiling so much information, they sell it off to the government, and they're using that to get more information about us and our buying habits and all that stuff. So
right, but as a means to what end? Like, I totally believe that, but why are they doing it? What is the goal?
The big answer for the private industry is that, you know what, if they know you like Hello Kitty, they will push Hello Kitty ads, to you, whether or not you're on Facebook or you're walking, think Minority Report, right? So the billboards are all personalized to everyone, and they need that. They call this this kind of I think at the size they call it the psychometric data. Your kind of they use all this side to create this profile of you.
I'll give you a simple example too. Why do you think Netflix shows are so addicting? These guys are making 100, 200, $300 million bets that a movie is going to hit. And if it doesn't hit, that can affect the bottom line for the whole quarter, maybe even year. So what they do is they use all this information to project whether or not a movie starring Ryan Reynolds, The Rock, and Gal Gadot is going to hit. And they use that information and try to extrapolate, oh, these are very overlapping audiences. Of course it's going to hit. And then you watch it. And then that affects their bottom line. So what it is, they're trying to abate risk.
They use
but isn't that also, sorry to interject, hi, I'm Paul, by the way.
Yes, hi.
Isn't that also the big change that's coming? All these companies have all that data. So we have a lot of data. But until now, they haven't really been able to do a perfect kind of filtering. And I think ChatGPT really is good at going through this information and coming up with answers that have been quite difficult, including certain connections have been quite difficult to get, unless you're an expert, in that field.
It would. I can see kind of a hybrid where you use ChatGPT to convert all the text into broad themes, and then these broad themes can be then created as a categorical variables. Then that gets fed into machine learning models to say, hey, what's how do we maximize viewership for certain types of genres of movies?
Yeah, I think the biggest change is that it takes the guesswork a bit out of it,
Yeah, I'm like, I believe all this is true. They're watching, whatever, they're collecting everything, but we do still have a choice at the end of it. So I guess the question is, at what point is it interference versus just observation? Because we can choose to watch something or not. We can choose to spend the money based on the ad or not, but I don't know. People are up in a panic about our privacy, but I think the more and more people and the more mundane things that they watch, the less like it's going to feel like an invasion, and it's just going to, do you know what I mean?
I would make the argument that we've been kind of, like you think about how think about there's a trade-off here, right? So here we're in a world where our attention span is much more fragmented, and so yeah, maybe this power of persuasion might not be as powerful 50 years ago, but when you're running a commercial that's watched by 70 million Americans, that's also very powerful because those 70 million Americans reinforce each other by, with that one commercial that they watched. Whereas here you have this, they're trying to convince you need to watch this movie, but
The
you're
influence, yeah.
if you go to if at the Monday water cooler you're the only one who watches it, that's gonna be that itself is a lack of impact.
I see.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's I think the whole thing about data scientists, it just helps reduce risk in whatever investment you're making. And if you just look at it from that lens, then you can kind of really understand what everyone's trying to do. So like, okay, we got a movie. How do we promote it? Where do we promote it? Do we promote it in like, coffee shops? Do we promote it in libraries? And they can use that data to kind of really fish out what's the best way to hit our market, that type of stuff.
The way I kind of think about it also is data science is a form of and it's kind of a cold thing to think about, but it's a way of maximizing your economic output. So if you don't underwrite well, then maybe you can lend out $100 million. You can make 100 loans because 3 of them will go bad. But if you can kind of use data science to say that, okay, we reduce the bad rate from 3 to 2, then maybe you make 101 loans. And in a world where you have 101 loans, economic growth is going to be higher than in a world where you only make 100 loans because this loan leads to growth, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Cool. Any last questions? No? Okay. Go ahead. Paul, you good?
Yeah, I'm good. Sorry, I joined a bit late, but sounds like an interesting discussion. Is this recorded, by the way? Can we?
Yeah, I'm going to be posting it up today so that you guys can watch it. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Yang, again, and everyone for joining. I hope you guys really found this informative. I think AI is really spectacular. You guys should all be using it. ChatGPT is free, so you should definitely get your hands dirty on it because it is something groundbreaking. It is something different. You can ask it to do a lot of work for you. And so it's going to really change the way you do work, and it's really important. So take care, guys, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Yang.
Yes.